Alright, welcome back. Or if you're looking at I might have created one single clip out of the multiple parts I did for in these sessions. So let's see, we're gonna install System Center. Actually, we're gonna install System Center required files, programs, you name it, the prerequisites basically. So the system is part of the domain now. I showed you that in the previous clip there, or earlier I showed you that. So it's part of the domain, mylab.local. I'm logged in as a domain admin on this account. These are just my instruction steps basically. So we have done this part, we have downloaded the file, and we're now going to extract it. So I think I have extracted it as well in the previous clip or earlier. So this is the next day, so I'm doing this the next day. So yes, it's extracted now. We don't have any of the prerequisite files, so let's do that first. Let's run the installer and then download the prerequisite files, and then we can install SQL Server. I'm going to, while it's doing this, I'm going to mount my SQL Server instance or ISO image file to my virtual machine, and I'll start the install once it's done downloading the prerequisite files. So to get to the prerequisite files, just launch the installer, or the splash application is, I believe that's what's called. I don't know what they call it, but the loading screen, I suppose. Download required prerequisite files. So we're going to do that first. Click yes. We're going to specify the folder name, so I'm going to call it, I'm going to put it on C drive. I'm going to call it SCCM files, and we're going to let it download. While it's doing the download, in the background I'm going to mount my SQL Server instance or SQL Server image file. And there you go, the SQL Server installer, or the image file has been mounted. I can probably run the installer, but I'm going to just wait for this to finish downloading, and then I will start the SQL Server install. So this is, I'm going to post this as well on the channel in terms of what needs to be downloaded prior to actually setting up SCCM. If you don't do all these things, you're going to run into a bunch of errors. I think I have done the I think I have the recording from earlier instance where I actually tried doing this, and then this is how I got to the list in terms of what I need to do. So this server, this VM is a fresh install. There's nothing on it besides the fact that it was just, only the Windows 2022 Server Edition was installed on it, and it just joined the domain. That's about it. So that's all that's been done to it. So let's go look at the downloads real quick. How far are we in? For SQL Server, I'm going to mention this real quick. Make sure that the collation is set to this. I had found it a little bit difficult. I didn't know this part. So I went through the whole SQL Server install. I was like so excited to do System Center install. I let it choose do the default collation. I didn't know of this. So heads up, before you install the SQL Server, make sure you set the collation. I'll show you where exactly on what screen it's going to actually do that. Also, once the SQL Server is installed, don't worry about these log on account and all that stuff. I will show you how to actually set it to the network service. So the network service account will work. You must configure it to like domain account, network service, or local system. So I'm going to use, you cannot use a local user or entity service. So by default, SQL Server will use this when you do the install. But let it finish the install, and then later you can change that to network service. Also, it doesn't mention that, you know, have named pipe as well, but I'm going to actually enable that on my SQL Server. So make sure collation again. You need this, it's important. I think it's done downloads. Yeah, so that's done. I'm going to close that. Oh, actually, it's going to verify that. So these I mentioned resolve because I ran I did another test run after downloading all these files, and they haven't been resolved on this. So I'm going to remove this so I know which sections still need work. So this is not resolved yet. This is not resolved either, so nothing has been really resolved, right? So SQL Server, we haven't even done the install. So once we go through each step, I'm going to mark them resolved, just like you saw. So okay, the download has finished. I'm not going to do the install. I'm going to just exit out of here. So let's set up SQL Server. This is how you would set up a SQL Server instance. I have the image file mounted. Just double click that. We'll run the installer. Click on installation. New SQL Server standalone installation or add a feature. So I'm going to be doing the new SQL Server instance. Click next. I downloaded this from my Azure portal, so I will try to blank this out. I don't know if it's legal to actually leave it there, or is it illegal? I don't know. It came with it, so I'm assuming it's a free edition of SQL that you're licensed to have with SCCM. Like for SCCM, they give you standard edition of SQL to work with. You can't install anything else on that SQL Server. You cannot do that for having that SQL Server instance running. I guess I can't really say I can't check this. Enterprise core. Click next. Just going to do a bunch of checks real quick. And that's just giving you a warning here that, hey, you got a firewall, you must have firewall running. Make sure you got the port open or whatever, right? So if you're doing a standalone installation and then you're going to be connecting to it from external, but this is System Center, SQL Server install. I will not be installing anything else other than the SCCM database basically on this. That's what you're licensed for, I believe. So it's an honor system with Microsoft. Let's not make it worse for everybody else that actually likes the fact that, you know, they provide all this for free. Well, not for free, I suppose, but still not for any additional cost. So that's all you need to do is data engine services. I'm not going to be using any of the other things, to be honest. You don't need that for System Center. Click next. Okay, the number of CPU actually is 20 physical cores or 40 eligible with the hyper-threading enabled. So it just gave me a warning message because on this system I believe on my enabled 28 CPUs or 28 cores, because I have two CPUs basically with multiple cores and hyper-threading enabled. So yeah, as you can see, it's got 28 virtual 28 sockets. Okay. That's just a hyper-threading, so and multiple cores. So it's giving me a warning message and it's letting me go through, so that's good. It's going to just limit it to 20. That's what it was telling me. I'm going to leave the default instance to my MS SQL. It will be at the server configuration page where you will need to set the collation. So I'm going to minimize that in the background so I can see. So this is the so we are at the server configuration screen. This is where you need to stop and change the collation. So by default it goes Latin General CIAS, right? I don't change these right now. I will do that later. So server configuration collation, let's set it to, it's asking me to do SQL Latin General. So I click on customize. The drop down, I don't know if I'd be able to locate it. No, I can't. It's not. So I guess I could just keep going down and then find SQL Chinese and no Latin. I think it's Latin, right? So okay, a much easier way to do this. I think it will be here. I don't think you can actually even pick from the drop down, so we're going to choose the second option, and now we're going to browse down to SQL Latin. It says SQL Latin General CP1, that's a CI case insensitive underscore AS, so that's the one, not AI or not CS, so CI, this is the one. So make sure you got the exact one, please. Otherwise you'll have to muck around and then change this later down the road on your SQL Server. So SQL Server Latin 1 General CP1 CI AS. Once that's done, so make sure that's the right one. I usually do mixed mode. I don't just do a single user for SQL Server install. I'm going to use my not built-in account. I guess I can give it the built-in account as well. I'm going to, let's see, what else is there? I'm going to give it a password, which I'll probably forget later, so no. I don't have to worry about any of these other things here. Click next. Click install. We're gonna just let SQL Server finish doing its install. Well, you can do the other next things that are actually on the list here while it's doing the install. So let's do that while it's doing the SQL Server install, because there are just a bunch of downloads, right? So you will need the ADK. So I'm gonna all these three of these requirements are actually met by just downloading the proper files from here. Let's open our browser. You will need you'll need the first one and the second one, so ADK and the PE. Let's download that, and let's download the other one. So these are just installer, like these are not offline installer files, it's just online installation. So it'll do online download and online installation, so you'll need internet access for that. So close that. That's about it. I don't know if I should really run that, but let's do it anyways. So downloads. So if we go through the ADK setup, it should let me run it, but I don't know. I give it the default path. If you want to install it somewhere else, you can choose the path. So it's asking me, hey, you need 1.5 gigs. On the System Center, I gave my virtual machine about 115 gigs of space, because with System Center, you do kind of run into the fact that it runs out of space real quick. So and just make sure that you have at least 100 gigs minimum, maybe 115 like I have done for storage for on the C drive itself or on the main, because I like to install it on the main partition. I don't do separate drives for that. So no, I don't want to do Microsoft and then accept the agreement. So it complains about, so it needs the user statement migration tool, so that's checked off. Deployment tool, ICD, configuration designer, these are just the defaults. Just leave them as such and click install. Now hopefully it'll let me do the install at the same time as SQL Server is installing in the background. Right now it's just doing the download. So let's do that task manager again. As you can see, it's just doing the download at this point. So. My SQL Server looks like it's about to finish the install. But it seems that it is letting me do both installs at the same time. Well, this is almost done finishing installation, so maybe that's why it let me do the install. But usually try to avoid doing this. Don't run multiple installers at the same time. It's a recipe for disaster. Looks like my ADK installer will finish before my SQL install. So okay, that has finished. I'm going to close that window. I'm going to start doing the install or download, at least for the other file as well, the PE environment, right? So yeah, Windows PE setup. That's a bigger chunk of oh yeah, there you go. Needs more. Okay, before I do this, my SQL Server said something. So everything succeeded, everything has worked fine. So I'm going to hit close. I will start the install here, and I'm going to show you what you need to do for SQL Server next. There is one more thing that you need to do before you run the System Center installer. So I guess I agree. Make sure you read the agreement. It's very important that you read it. So just they give you the option to read it in French as well if you're bilingual. Click accept. Windows PE. Click install. As you can see, I'm already eating up space, right? So Windows PE 3.5, 3.6 gigs, Windows ADK 1.5 gigs, SQL Server, that's another few gigs right there, 2 gigs, I think, 2.5 gigs. So it kind of adds up real quick. Okay, while it's doing that, let me show you what you need to do for so this is, well, I'm not going to mark it resolved. Well, I guess I'm going to mark this as resolved because we have set the configuration or collation properly. NT service, we're going to do this part right now. So to do that, click on the start menu, search for SQL Server, and just start typing SQL and you'll be able to get to SQL Server Configuration Manager. I usually like to pin this, so if I have to come back to it, I can easily find it. So open SQL Server Configuration Management Tool. Go to let's do the change real quick here. So you got your SQL Server running. As you can see, it's logged on as empty service. It said, hey, the instruction, it will complain that if you try to run the installer, it will complain that your SQL Server is set to the wrong instance or wrong user account. So what I did was double click. I'm going to change this to built-in account to network service. I'm going to hit apply. It's going to stop the server and then restart it. So yes, it will restart the SQL Server. Okay, looks like that went successfully. So now you can see it's saying, okay, I'm logged in as NT Authority, network service account. So you're good for this bit. You don't have to do this piece, but I do like to enable my, oh, actually it is enabled, so that's good. Usually it doesn't enable the name pipe option, so I usually go ahead and enable this right here. That's it that you need to do for SQL. That's the bit of configuration here that you need to do. So we have this resolved. SQL Server, we can say, okay, this has been resolved as well. So I'm going to mark it as resolved. One of the things that will actually also fail on is, hey, I don't have the Microsoft Remote Differential Compression enabled, or that feature doesn't exist. It's actually a feature, not a software. So, well, I guess in the background it's a software. Every feature is a software on application running. So page not found. I guess sure, set Google as my default browser while I'm here anyways. So yes. Close that. So to get this sorted out, you will need to launch your server manager and enable the feature. So like it says, it's a feature that's available on the Windows Server. Before we do that, okay, my pre-installation of my PE instance or install has successfully completed. I'm going to close that. The SQL Server has finished install. I'm going to close the installer. Let's go launch server manager real quick, and we're going to enable, and so we have done this SQL Server. We have done all three of these. So I'm going to mark them as resolved, and this is resolved as well. PE is done as well, so resolved. And this is all the others. SQL Server. We're gonna just finish with resolving this, and then we're gonna do a quick restart, and then we can start the installation. So let's finish this part here. Add, remove. Click next. Next. And next. It's a feature, so remote. There it is, Remote Differential Compression. Click next and click install. I'm just going over my checklist again to make sure that I got everything. So I've done that too. So I got SQL running. I got the right collation, not co-location. That's collation. Co-location is for hosting and all that stuff, where you put the servers, you lease space, and you send your servers there to run your environment, basically. So I got all of that done. I have enough storage capacity. So okay, so the installation finished. I'm going to close that. I'm going to close that because we have done all of it. I'm not going to do the install just yet. I'm going to actually restart this machine because I like when I'm doing a major install, I prefer to restart the system before doing that install. It's always a good practice to do that, because otherwise it might complain, hey, you need a restart, or something else needs a restart. So before doing a major installation of a product, if you can, if it's a virtual machine, easy enough, but if it's a server, I guess a little complicated. But I wouldn't install anything major on a server that has multiple roles, multiple services running. So you don't want to have Exchange Server and System Center on the same hardware, basically. So yeah, let's do a restart here. Okay, we are back after the restart. Let's do the installation. So once you have gone through all these steps, you have all the required files, you have done all these fixes, everything in this list, A to Z. At the time of this recording, I guess, unless there's something else they add later, but to install 2203 edition for System Center, you need to make sure that you have done all these. Once you have it done, there'll be zero failed messages, zero error messages, unless there's something else that I missed or I didn't. Please do post a comment or a question about it if you do run into something else that I haven't actually run into. So we're going to go to the extracted file again, the installer, run the splash file. I don't know why they call it splash, because I guess it splashes in your face. And do comment below why they call it the splash screen, or why they call it splash. They gotta just call it setup, right? So alright, let's start the install. You need to have your key handy as well if you actually have the key available. I will pause the installation at that stage so I don't share the key. I think with the internet you can probably find the keys online, but I have the proper key from my Azure portal. So again, I have a student account and I use this to kind of learn basically different things. So I'm going to use typical installation options. Yes, please. I'm going to leave everything default. So this is where you'll need to get your key, or you can just do the install evaluation edition if you just want to try it out. So once you've entered your key, on the next screen you'll be greeted with, hey, do you want to accept these license agreements? So as anybody would, look at the license terms, look at the privacy statement, read them, and then understand them, and then only come back and accept. I have already done this, so I did this when I paused the video anyway. So I read them and I think I've understood them, and I accept them, I suppose. So that's why I'm going to accept them. So make sure you read your license terms and agreements. We're going to continue with the install. The next screen would be just basically telling you what it's going to do. So click next. It's going to ask you, hey, do you want to download the prerequisite files? But I have already downloaded them. It's saying server name. You don't need that. If you have it on the network, that's great, but I have it locally stored anyways, so I'm going to just browse to it. Select that. You can actually download it to the local drive too. So, and then click next. It's going to validate if it's the current files that you really need for installation. So we'll let it finish. Once it's done the checks or the downloads, whatever it needs to do there, depending on how you chose it, you'll be greeted with the next screen, which asks you, hey, what is the site code? I'm giving it a name, but you can also give it a number, for example 420, something like that, if that's what your site code is. Maybe I'll do that. I'll do 420 instead of lab, because my site name is my lab. dot local. Oh, my lab. Actually, my lab is just fine. I don't want to give my my lab.local. Because that is not. Maybe, you know what? Because this looks much better. And you just click next. It'll ask you. Oh, well, I guess it doesn't ask you. The VMware does, but I guess you have to be part of the CEIP, Customer Experience Improvement Program. So there's not really much choice, is there? So click next and accept that. I am going to skip this for now because I don't have a cloud instance running. I won't be using any of that feature set. On the next screen, you'll see the summary basically of what it's going to do, what services and what protocols and all that stuff. Click next. It's going to do the checks. If I hadn't done the SQL Server install, you'll see a bunch of error messages. I will try to put the clip as well in here where I ran the instance without knowing what was required. So ran the installer. These are all the failures that I get. First of all, you need the SQL Server running, and for SQL Server there are a few things to be mindful of. First of all, it needs to run as a NT service. So when we're doing the SQL Server install, we're going to make sure that these things actually be set up properly, so we don't have to revisit this. I will be installing the SQL Server Standard. SCCM does come with the SQL Server Standard licensing, I believe. I think you can use the SQL Server Standard just for SCCM. You can download it from Microsoft website, the SQL Server Standard Edition. RDC, Remote Differential Compression. So all these we'll go through first in the proper, we'll call it preparing to install SCCM. So SQL Server, lots of issues with SQL Server. Windows deployment tool, need that. User state management, migration tool, USMT. So basically Windows deployment kit, you need that. You need the PXE, I think, yeah, pre-install environment install as well. So you need that as well. Pre-installation environment. I think this is good. Bits, it gives you warning, but it works. So I did not pause this bit. So I just want to give you an idea in terms of what it goes through, all the things that it goes through. This is the longest step, setting up SQL Server database. So I'll be forwarding this. I might pause or stop forwarding if I remember to mention something here. Alright, it just finished. So yes, my first run I did earlier was also about 46 minutes, so 43 minutes. But depending on your server or on your environment, it might be different. So alright, let's check it out. It says, okay, you have finished install. You can look at the logs. There'll be tons of probably error messages and lots of things that didn't work. So looks like there are lots of skips that I did. Anyway, so I'm going to just quickly try to see if it actually works. I'm going to open the console. I'm not going to restart yet. So you can close, see the post configuration task in the configuration manager and document library. So let's look at that. So I guess there will be a bunch of updates, bunch of patches and all that stuff. So I'm going to just quickly launch the console, and in my next session I will show you how to do the updates, patching and all that stuff and all the fancy stuff. So I'm gonna close that. Hopefully I don't need a restart to show you guys that it's actually done doing the install. I had thought that would load, but looks like, oh, there we go. Just when I was about to close it and do a restart. So there you have it. You have so you have the 2203 version installed. That's the console version. In the next clips or in the next sessions, I will show you guys how to go about doing the in-console updates. So this is done. Everything is working, or the default installation is done. And we will be back in a different, I might have already uploaded the files, the video files, but if not, I will do them later. So please come back and then subscribe to the channel. I appreciate that. Thanks guys, thanks for watching.